So Clive, thanks so much for joining us at the
Pleasure to
Borders
be
Book
here.
Festival and with
Yeah.
Bloom Media. So your memoir, Everything is Everything, has come out, and I found it really interesting that you've spoken about your background and your history, but also about how you don't want to be defined by it. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, there is background, there's history, and there's being labelled unfairly. And I think there is that danger, or there was that danger when I was a young journalist, of me being labelled as a black journalist and not a journalist who just happens to be black. And what that means is you end up doing so-called black stories all the time because of lazy thinking by an employer or a boss or an editor or whatever. Notting Hill Carnival, we'll send the black guy. Race riot, let's send the black guy. And that was very much the case for a lot of women as well. When I got into this business, most women were reporting on the WI meeting or the soft social affairs story. Kate Adie was an anomaly. She really was. And I didn't want my colour to define my career at the start of it. I didn't want the viewer to sort of think, oh, he's only covering that story because he's black. He probably wouldn't be able to do any other story. And I didn't want that. So I made that clear. And what I love about the BBC is that they understood. They understood that. And as a result, my first posting as a foreign correspondent was to Japan, the most undone first place on earth in the eyes of some. So the BBC got it. And I hope now when people see me, they don't think, oh, it's that black guy. They think, oh, it's Clive, who's just covering the story. And I think that's actually really quite important.
Do you think there's an element of nothing about us without that in the approach of getting sort of marginalised groups to tell marginalised stories? Or do you think we've kind of gotten beyond that now where anyone can tell these stories?
I actually don't think that's what's happened. I think the public perception of the veracity of storytelling depends on who is telling the story. So it would be weird if I ended up doing a story on sexism at work or misogyny in the workplace. I think that would be odd. I think there is a sense that you can believe what is being put out there in response to that story if it's being told by someone who's living that truth. So I think times have changed. I mean, going back to when I started out in journalism and not wanting to be labelled, not having my colour define who I am, that was 30 odd years ago. Now you've got a plethora of media out there. You can get your news from all kinds of sources. So what is it that's going to take you to a particular source? Hopefully, the fact that you can trust it. And you're more likely to trust it and believe it if it's someone like you doing a story on misogyny, if it's someone like me doing a story on race. That makes perfect sense. I mean, doing a story on disability in the workplace, you need someone who's been through the mill, who understands it. So there was a little bit of insecurity in me, actually, when I started out. Maybe I was a little bit chippy. We're not doing a black story. I'm not going to be defined. May have been an element of that. Now, I'm the first one to put my hand up. I covered Mandela's funeral. I covered the death of George Floyd in America. Police brutality on the streets of Britain. I did all of that. South African elections. I do all of that. And that makes sense to me now, but it's my decision to do it. It's my choice to do it. It's not just me being sidelined into it because it's what I've always done. And actually, I'd rather be somewhere else. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And you've been, like you said, you've been posted to Japan, you've been to Iraq, you've been to some really dangerous and intense places.
Fascinating places too.
Fascinating
all of
places.
them, weirdly.
Of course.
Despite the war and the bullets and the bombs and whatever, but fascinating.
What has been the most challenging part of your career?
Challenging in what way?
Do you find going to these places challenging, or do you find that your sort of curiosity drives you there?
Yeah, 9 times out of 10, the curiosity is enough to keep you going, even though it might be, a difficult circumstance, a war or a flood or a great human drama that involves mass casualties. Your curiosity to see how people react, which is why I got into this business in the first place. I'm just interested in the human condition, what it means to be a human being, how you react under stress and under pressure. Is it different for someone living in Japan compared to someone living in Iraq or South Africa or Israel, Palestine, America, whatever? Actually, it isn't different, and that's what's the key. We're all bound by this thing called humanity. And so it's endlessly fascinating for me to be in different places and to experience the different ways that people cope with adversity. But as far as being challenged by all that is concerned, yes, it's tiring being in a war zone. But at the same time, you see the worst of humanity. It's that old cliche, you see the worst of humanity, you see the best of humanity. And that's what makes the best drama, the best storytelling. In a novel, in art, in anything. You know, it's drama. Seeing the good and the bad together. And I find that endlessly fascinating. And people do too, because we're all drawn to human stories. You know, we're all drawn to, you know, what it means to be human. And that's all we are as storytellers. We're simply telling viewers, readers, listeners, whatever, what it means to be human, no matter what the circumstance.
And when you're covering these kind of stories, how do you sort of protect yourself in them? It would be really easy for that to kind of just completely consume you and you to never be able to detach yourself from it. Yeah. How do you navigate that? Great question.
You've got to keep a distance, I think, but not so far away that you're not telling the story in an effective way that will touch people who are consuming your news. So you will get close to people. You will make friends with people. You will see stuff going on. But ultimately, I think you have your own limits. And I find that when I leave a war zone or a particularly challenging story, I try to shut off. I don't watch the news. I keep away from it. I will go to the opera, I will go to, a pop concert, I will read, I will go to art galleries, I will do anything to keep my mind away from it. Images will always come back to you, particularly of something that's horrific. And I haven't been diagnosed with PTSD. I haven't been able to not function because of some of those images coming back, which is the classic definition of PTSD. I'm still able to carry on my daily life. But I think that's because I've learned to try to compartmentalize and shut off when I come back from a story. You're absorbed in it when you're there. You're part of it. You're trying to get the truth of these people in Gaza, get their truth out to the public back home. You're trying to explore all this stuff, and it can be painful. But I think for me, and it may be different for others, but for me, it's important to try to shut myself off when I come back and to do something completely different. And frankly, avoid the news if I can.
Yeah, finding that balance is really important.
Yeah, finding that balance. You know, you want to be close enough to the story to tell it properly. But you don't want it to become your life. That in there lies trouble, I think.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So you're going to be sort of BBC front for the general election this year. I wanted to ask you, there's a lot of discourse at the minute surrounding young people in the election. You know, we're not a very voting demographic, or we're not considered to be. And I've been sort of debating in my mind recently whether that's because politicians don't see us as a target demographic, so they don't direct their policies towards us, or whether it's our responsibilities to become a voting demographic so that they make policies towards us. Where do you think that lies?
I think the bottom line is politicians don't see you as getting out there and voting. And if you're a politician and you want to get into power, you need votes. And they will target that demographic that votes, and that tends to be older people. The problem with that is that it means that the issues of younger people get sidelined. You know, how difficult is it to get a job, to get on the housing ladder, you know, to make your way in the world? And that's because politicians ignore young people. And I'm not sure if more lobbying, you know, more activism is the way forward, because, you know, a lot of young people voted for Jeremy Corbyn. They didn't turn out again in the next election. They just didn't. And that's the problem. If the voting demographic is flighty, no politician's going to focus on it. But they know old people vote, and they vote every time. And that is the key. Now, that doesn't mean that you sort of think, oh, well, I'm young, there's no point making an effort, I might as well not get involved. I think the opposite should be true. Get involved, vote, push, continue to try, and raise your voice. And try to convince the politicians that actually there is a constituency that might be lower than the age of 30, but they vote. They do vote. But sometimes young people don't make it that easy because they switch on and switch off in a way that old people don't.
Yeah, and you said in your talk that it was set to be an exciting election, but I think there are quite a lot of young people across the UK and in Scotland specifically that feel quite nervous. Are you hopeful for young people in Scotland going into this next election, this next government, or do you have your doubts as well?
No, I think you've got to be positive. You can't go, especially being young, you can't go through life thinking, oh God, this is all a disaster. What's the point of reaching the age of 30? Oh my Lord. You can't think that way. You've got to be positive and you've got to keep pushing forward. And of course, ultimately, you will be that person that reaches the demographic that the politicians want to target. So you need to build the kind of sort of life that you can, build a kind of existence that you want to reach that point where you've got stuff in life and you want to protect it. And as a result, Mr. Politician, I want to protect what I've got, what I've achieved. I've got young children. I want them to have a future. You'd better start listening to me. So it sounds counterintuitive. They're targeting older people, so don't bother. No, push, get your message out there, and convince them that, you know, it's a demographic that's important. And as a result, those issues that are important to you will come to the fore. And I think, you know, politicians, they are looking to the future as well. They are looking to try to have a voting bloc that's engaged and wants to be part of the political framework that they're trying to put out there. So keep pushing. And as a result, I am hopeful, actually. I am hopeful, but it might not feel that way sometimes when you're trying to get a job and you're trying to get on the housing ladder and so on. You know, the Conservatives are saying that they're going to get rid of stamp duty for first-time buyers on properties up to £425,000. Now, you know, it might be dismissed as a gimmick by their critics. It might be seen as a positive way to try to engage younger people who are trying to make their way in the world. And I think there are policies in all the manifestos that can be helpful to young people. So it's worth looking at those too. It's not all doom and gloom, I don't think. But then I am almost 60, so there you go.
I think there is quite a lot of pessimism at the minute, especially amongst young people. And it's really hard to fight through that, but it's important to.
It is important to, or else, you know, you can't be young and jaded. That would be so sad. You know, young and despondent and... yeah, that would be sad. Try to keep positive.
Yeah. And I always ask you, because you always say that truth is sort of at the heart of your work and at the heart of journalism, or it should be.
It should be.
How worried are you about this sort of new algorithmically driven social media landscape where people are only getting content that aligns with their views and there's a lot more room for sort of bias and untruth? Does that worry you?
Oh, massively. I hate it. I despise it. It's the worst thing in the world. If we could put the stopper back on the bottle marked social media, I'd shove it back on. The problem is we can't. It's too late. And we've ended up with a much more polarized society in those democracies where social media is very, very big and unregulated. And I think it's a huge problem. You've only got to look at America. As a place where an already polarized society is split further and further apart because of algorithms playing to our worst prejudices. In order for someone to make money, that's what's so shocking to me about social media. It's not as if certain tech entrepreneurs believe that this particular point of view is important and ideologically I'm driven to this thing and this way of thinking and that's why my algorithm. It's just to make money. And in order to make money, you polarize society and you end up with people wanting to cause a revolution in America, storming the Capitol building. That is unbelievable to me. All because a few people in Silicon Valley want to make some cash. It's absolutely disgraceful. Social media needs to be regulated in the same way that any other media is. We are in exactly the same situation we were in the 16th, 17th century. The pamphleteers all across London, putting out all kinds of stuff, unregulated. Regulated, it became the British press. And that's what you need. We need to end the wild west that is social media, because any old crap is being put out there, and it's rubbish, most of it.
Do you think that journalists can use social media to their gain and to try and change that? And what would your tips be for that?
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, in the same way that you can spread lies and propaganda and rubbish, you can spread truth. You can try, but it's a constant battle. And it's a battle you shouldn't have to fight, frankly. You know, it shouldn't be the case that you're having to, deal with the lies and the propaganda that is put out there by one side. You shouldn't have to do that. But we do. And the only thing you can do, if the social media space continues to be unregulated, is to try to keep pushing the truth. Try to keep pushing the truth. And through not dismissing people who believe in conspiracy theories out of hand, but trying to explain that this is actually how it is. This is where the truth lies. Make the point that every single legal challenge, every single one that Donald Trump made to suggest that the collection was rigged, 60 or 70 court cases all around America, he lost every single one. And many of them were under the jurisdiction of Republican judges. That's the truth. That's what you push. But you get this barrage. More rubbish. It was a rigged election. It was rigged. Blah, 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 blah. And getting those basic facts out there. He's lost every single court case, folks. He's lost every single court case. It's tough. Yeah. But that's where the truth is, and that's what you've got to do. Just keep fighting for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess also people using social media have to sort of try and find it as well, filter through the rubbish.
Well, there's this thing called, what's it, British Broadcasting Corporation, BBC?
Mm-hmm.
They're quite good.
They're pretty good.
Yeah. Go to the BBC. Ladies and gentlemen.
Shameless promo.
I'm totally shameless when it comes to BBC.
You entered the BBC through a graduate trainee programme.
Yeah, I did, through a trainee scheme, yeah.
Yeah, and there's still a few of those kicking around now.
Yeah, not as many as there used to be. When I got onto the course, there were very few at colleges and universities. I mean, there was Falmouth, I remember, City University, London College of Printing, Preston had a course, Bristol, but that was it. That was it. Now, you've got so many communications courses at universities all over the place.
Yeah.
And as a result, the BBC, I think, has felt, well, we can save the money and cut back on some of the training courses they had. But no, it was brilliant because I got a place at the London College of Printing. And I remember having to look at my bank balance and work out, could I afford to get a loan to pay for the course?
Yeah.
And I applied to the BBC at the same time, and the thing about the BBC courses, they pay you. So it was a no-brainer.
Of course.
So yeah, so I did that. But yeah, I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed my time on the course, and I started in local radio in Bristol, and it was great because it's a wonderful city. But it also meant that I could make my mistakes in the background, as it were, in local radio, and learn the craft of reporting, storytelling properly from the bottom up, rather than try to come in at the top and screw up and then never get a chance again. So that would be a good recommendation, ladies and gentlemen.
That's a good piece of advice. And do you have any other advice to young people, maybe graduates who are like me? Basically, do you have advice for me? Leaving a journalism course and trying to then enter the real industry.
Try and work out what you want, ultimately, what you really want to do, and work out how you're going to get there. Have a 4 or 5 year plan. That's basically what I decided to do. How I was going to get from A to B to C. What would I need in order to get to where I wanted to be, which was a foreign correspondent? Work it out. And keep an eye on those people that you admire in the media. Watch what they do, how they do it. What is it that makes their storytelling better than somebody else? learn by example. Learn from the work of the people that you admire. Determination, absolutely. Curiosity. You know, you don't just want to be on TV because you want to be on TV. The amount of young people that I come across who say, what do you want to do? They want to be presenters. Well, I'm like, okay. I just happen to be a journalist who does his stuff on TV. That's it. I am fundamentally a journalist. That's what I am. And I'm proud to be a journalist. And I've got my NUJ card and I'm very proud of it. I'm not a presenter. Do you know what I mean? And I think you've got to be clear about why you want to be into this, why you want to get into this business. If it's just to be on TV and be famous, well, go on X Factor or something. You know, there are lots of other ways that you can do that. If you're interested in storytelling and getting across what it means to be a human being, the human condition, to talk about it and explain it, then get into journalism and be determined and push. And you're going to get rejection letters. Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I've got tons of them. But you just keep pushing.
Absolutely, that's amazing. Thank you. I think that's all the time we have because you've got to go film Mastermind.
I've got to go. Yeah, I've got to film Mastermind.
So thanks so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Thank you.